So in addition to those specific skills, we were hoping we could hear a few examples of where you've seen them put to use most effectively. So Governor Kernan, we'd like to start with you. Can you think of a group, a citizen, someone you can use as an example of a very successful, engaged group or citizen?
When I took office, our Center for the Homeless was the Maranatha Temple on Michigan Street, and it was just a warehouse for people to show up at 10 o'clock at night and get booted out the door at 7 o'clock the next morning. And Darcy Chisholm, Dean Dave Link, and Father Malloy really are responsible for the Center for the Homeless that we have today, which is the prototype of a Center for the Homeless across the country. And Darcy and Dave, didn't have to get involved. The university didn't have to get involved, but a coalition was created then that involved the city. It involved the Ministerial Alliance in St. Joe County, and involved the Junior League, and obviously Notre Dame. And what stands out for me most is that at the end of that year, at the end of 1988, we had a fire at an apartment house over on Colfax, right? Colfax and William Street. And it was a place where we had a lot of homeless and very poor people that were living, and it was a horrific fire. Fire department showed up. There was no, people were streaming out of the building, again, because it was very crowded. Fire department went to work, got it done. I don't think we had any fatalities in the fire, which could have very easily killed everyone there. And I got on the phone and called Dave Link, and I said, and they were still renovating the old Gilberts to become the Center for the Homeless. And I called Dave Link and I said, Dave, is there any chance we can open up the center early? And early was like 4 months early. It was scheduled to open in April. And they got on it, got it open, got it cleaned up. We then asked for donations in the community for some of the things that these people had lost. And it was an extraordinary outpouring in the community. We had semis that were full of clothing and other things. And it was just, for me, was the epitome of what you would hope would happen in your community. The way people came together, did the right things, did it very efficiently. And now, as I say, we've got the Center for the Homeless, which has over the years been an extraordinary benefit to people in the community who need our help.
So when they were first putting together that coalition, they were working with other nonprofits, or they were working with Notre Dame, they were working with the city. It was a strategy that was had a broad base, and that's
exactly. It was a four-pronged group. It was Notre Dame. It was the city of South Bend. It was the Ministerial Alliance, and then the Junior League actually played a role as well.
Mayor Lickey, do you have a group in mind when you hear active citizenship where you think they've got it right?
Well, actually, let me do sort of a little bit of a range with a couple different examples. There was a woman who called herself the mayor of Grant Street, Emily Lentage. And she would always call and complain that the railroad wasn't taking care of their property that ran nearby. And We would send code out when we could to do some cleanups, but she was out there all the time, just taking care of her neighborhood, cleaning the neighborhood, rallying neighbors to do the same. And so that's sort of the individual activist portion. Secondly, I think of really a dual combination. Gladys Muhammad, Jeff Gibney, Gladys being a community organizer, deeply involved in the community. Jeff, head of South Bend Heritage Foundation, working together to transform what used to be called the block, where we had one year 7 murders, all sorts of drug activity, gambling, other sorts of illegal activity, prostitution. There's now affordable housing on that block, new single-family homes on that block, and in addition, spreading out from there, some shopping on Chapin Street, the museum campuses at Copsha Home and the Studebaker Museum, Civil Rights Heritage Center, all of that growing out of the work of these two individuals in particular, who would build coalitions and work with the city, work with the University of Notre Dame, with IU South Bend, to accomplish these things. But most importantly, really rooted in the neighborhood to understand what the issues were. It was really actually a challenge when we looked to tear down some of the old commercial structures on West Washington Street. People still wanted it to be a commercial strip. Well, it was never going to be that again, but by bringing people together and working on a plan, we're able to come up with a strategy that allowed us to move forward and really transform that neighborhood. And then I would just point to the South Bend Community Hall of Fame. If you go into Century Center, there's a display on the wall. These two gentlemen are on that display for obvious reasons, but it really, again, tells the story of broad activity in our community, from Ray Snyder, who spent 40 years doing Chet Wagner Little League, to the Murphys and the Leaps, philanthropists, to other business people who've been engaged, to artists, to community activists. Really tells the wide range of areas that you can bring your talents to bear to make a difference in our community.
Is there anything specific? I mean, we've talked about coalitions in both examples so far, but if you look at something like trying to transform a city block or a city neighborhood, I mean, clearly, numerous external forces, deindustrialization, these large globalization that are hurting cities like South Bend in many ways. I mean, were there certain skills that just kept them persistent against these larger forces? Was there something in particular that helped them to bring that block back?
I think it's a vision. It's a shared vision, and you have to have buy-in from the residents in the neighborhood. You have to have buy-in from the city. Then you have to get support from other funding sources or coalition partners. And then it's persistence and also patience. These things don't happen overnight. Sometimes you jump in with a lot of enthusiasm. You think, I'm going to change the world, and 2 weeks later it's not changed yet, and you get discouraged. But you really need to know you're in it for the long haul, and that, again, to have allies who will sustain you in that effort.
Mayor Parent, an example of an engaged group that did it right from you.
Well, there's all kinds of engaged groups. Some of them were against me. It was interesting to me that for most of my early life, I saw people, it was they. So they did this, they did that. Then I became a they, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. You're there. But there's all kinds of examples of how, I was instrumental in getting the Kovalevsky Stadium built, and there were all kinds of groups against it at some point. Joe, I know people think you did it, and that's all right.
Well, that's what I tell them.
Yeah. And so there was a fair tax group. There were all kinds of groups, and they fought. And this is a democracy, so when, and Joe and Steve both know about these things, when a mayor or a city council or both decide to do something, then people organize. And some of them organized quite well. I mean, on that particular issue, the city was sued. It went down to the state Supreme Court, as a matter of fact, and we were spending money on the stadium while it was being, what's the right word? Litigated. And we'd spent $1 million by the time it got up to the state Supreme Court, and fortunately had good lawyers, and we won that case. Otherwise, it would have been really deeply difficult for me, as well as for other people who supported it. But to get that done, as an example, there were all kinds of people involved for it either. I mean, many members of the Chamber of Commerce were for it, many members in the community. One guy, John Peck, I think some of you may remember him, he did a study about the possible economic impact of that, and it was done almost after the fact. You know, one of the things people don't realize is the big they. Sometimes they think that they know what they're doing. Heck, we had to make a decision on a stadium within about a 7-day period, and I'm sure that you've had to experience that. So you go with your guts and you make that decision. But all these things happen with people both for and against, particularly at that level. But you're speaking to 3 people here for whom it's now easier for us to probably decide that we're going to get involved in this or that because we sort of have a reputation that's established. But for people who don't have that, and they're building their way into more involvement, I just go back to what we said earlier. Just decide, just do it. Don't worry too much about what people will say or think about you, and move forward and help to make the community a better place. In fact, not too long ago, I went to the Better Block deal on Western Avenue. This was a group that was organized by a small number of people. So I went just to find out who was behind this. It was pretty interesting and intriguing. And the number of people who want to take this approach to improving streets like Western Avenue. And it was really something that was well done.